DSCTV.
So I'll call the meeting to order of the Regional School Committee. Thank you for everyone who's coming. I think many of you here for a presentation that will happen shortly. Also, for those of you who have received the packet, you'll notice that this evening the two Headmaster's reports are in the consent agenda. When we get to that, if you have questions, please ask them at that time in order to us to get to the presentations sooner in our agenda this evening. So we will start with the student report. Calvin, would you like to go first?
Yeah. So MLK Day is coming up soon in the middle school, and our motto is diversity builds strength. And then some things that are going on is January 9th is the middle school school council. January 13th is MLK Day. January 16th is off because of MLK Day. January 26th is Challenge Success Evening at 7 p.m. in the Mudge Auditorium. January 29th is the Chocolate Cafe at 2 p.m. in Linquist Commons. And February 3rd is the 8th grade pizza fundraiser. And then congratulations to 8th grader Jack Worcester, who won the Dover-Sherborn Middle School National Geographic Bee. And then another congratulations to Jade Arnone, Riley Schumacher, Ava Swadapong, and Haley Nystrom for having their writing published in the Hutch magazine.
Great. Thank you, Calvin.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Virginia?
Well, MLK Day, we don't have school, and that's Monday the 16th, and then right after that are exams, and that's starting the Tuesday the 17th and going till Friday the 20th. And we have Red Line Week starting tomorrow, so teachers can't give tests after that point before exams. We're still doing preparations for our talent show, which will probably be the third week in March, and on January 20th we are having pizza and games in the middle school auditorium after the basketball game until about 10 o'clock.
Thank you. And I think, Mr. Clerk, this is, usually we say sixth grade tessellation designs that are on display this evening. Thank you. Kelvin and Virginia, you're free to leave at any point this evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Budget stuff's really interesting.
If we need some extra seats, feel free to, Pam, if you want a seat, you want to take any one of the ones at the table and move it down, you can. I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. McAuliffe for our first presentation.
Thank you, Claire. Tonight, under the proposed budget agenda item, there are two presentations and then a review and discussion of questions that have been submitted related to the budget. The first presentation is will provide you with some additional information. There was some discussion at the last meeting about the proposed transition program, and Mr. Smith will introduce that presentation to all of us.
All right, thank you, Mr. McAuliffe, Ms. Graham, and members of the Regional School Committee. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Dermuth, who is the Director of the Bridge for Resilient Youth in Transition. We are very grateful that Paul is joining us tonight. We've had an opportunity to have Paul and members of his staff come to our school council, also to be working in conjunction with us all through this process, and we are extremely grateful, Paul, for all of your guidance, help, and support. In addition, Ellen Shagnon, our guidance director, grades 6 through 12, is present, as are members of the guidance staff, grades 6 through 12. So we thank you for taking time to be here tonight. So without further ado, Paul, would you like to come forward?
Sure. Where would you like me?
Here is fine.
Okay, that works. Sure. Hi everyone. So again, Paul Dermuth from BRYT, Brookline. It was originally called Brookline Resilient Youth Team, and it was a school-based program that started in Brookline. At this point, there are 47 of these programs across the state. The team that I'm lucky to be part of, our work is to support schools in starting up these programs and then continuously improving them over time. So I just want to say a couple of things, and then I'm going to launch really fast through a presentation. I think you'll get copies of the presentation, so you can go back and look at the slides. But my sense is you've done some real thinking about this, and so I don't want to tell you anything that you already know. But the thing that I do want to say before anything is, for us, it's been a sort of incredible pleasure to work with the leadership team at the high school here on planning this project. I can say unreservedly that it's been the most careful, thoughtful planning process with any school that we've worked with in the 47 replications of the program. So the work of initially thinking way out in advance about what it might look like to develop a program, why, to fund a program, to engage us in multiple meetings first in the school, with the school council, with the student council. I mean, it's really been with the leadership team, it's really been an incredible opportunity. And also, I think this is the first school committee that probably BRYT has come to visit in the planning stages in the 12 years that the program has been. So it's a great pleasure for me to be with you and to do the learning together with you about this work. Like I said, I have 10 slides I'm going to show you. I'm going to talk through them fast. I'll be happy to go back to any of them. I think Mr. Smith will give the copy out on paper, so you'll be able to look back at them. And so, here we go, and then to try to maximize your time on discussion. So, I'm going to get my clicker to work. It was working. Let's see.
You can touch the board.
Cancel that.
There we go. All right. So the very first thing to say is the part of what we do with schools when we go through planning process is we sit down and we do what we call it a year zero data process, meaning we say, if this is year zero, this is the year where there is no program in the school, then had we had a program, how many students might have availed themselves of the program? That allows us both to get a sense of the need for the program, and then also at the end of year one to compare outcomes for the students to the students in the current year, in the year zero. So we went through a really thoughtful process together with your team. And I guess I think about it this way. If we look at 100 students at Dover-Sherborn High, then this is what we found from looking at the data. So any typical 100 students. So typically about 5 will miss 5 or more days of school due to psychiatric and/or medical crises. So because we're going to take those 5 students or potentially any 5 students, and they won't be gone, right? You'll see that's sort of transparent there, but they'll be out of school. And and as we say, the curriculum train starts on day 1. It goes for 180 days. It doesn't stop. So the students will have missed those 5 or more days. They'll come back to school, and they'll have to catch up on whatever they've missed, and they'll have to be engaged with the curriculum going forward. So there's an academic challenge. Also, students who have missed school, particularly for psychiatric issues, are struggling often with emotional support needs, with a whole set of issues about coming back to school that go beyond the purely academic. So about 5 of your students of every 100, right? So that would be maybe about 30 students over the course of the year missing 5 or more days of school. And then of that 100, you have another 4 or 5 students that they'll come to school, but they won't be engaged in school and learning. They might be in the nurse's office, they might be following a really nice assistant principal around, they might be talking with, kind of like connecting with a counselor, they might be sitting with the guidance secretary. I don't know how it is, this is what we see in different things that are happening in schools across the state. But they won't be in class learning and engaging. So that was a very powerful process, actually, when we looked and we thought, it may not be that 10 of every 100 students here would, the program may not see 67 students or so a year here, but, there's going to be a significant number of students here who can benefit from these programs. So we just want to share that and kind of put that out, that we're not talking about a minuscule number of students in your schools who are struggling with these issues. So we really believe in what is now called the MTSS, or Multi-Tiered System Support Framework. And we think of it this way. So when we look at a school, we think that there needs to be different levels of support and even different time at different times for different students. And this is around the idea that when we talk about schools and wanting success for kids, if we really believe that all means all, that we're committed to every student's success, then we know that students need different levels of support. So all students need good core instruction, and they need good social emotional learning supports, right? All students do. Some students need more. It doesn't mean that they don't need the core, but they need additional supports. This could be students who need on the academic side. They could need office hours. They could need additional time during class. They could need different kinds of catch-up supports. And some students need additional mental health supports. That may be time with an adjustment counselor, with a school psychologist, other kinds of supports. That may mean a community counselor who supports them. And then there's a few students, the 5 to 10 students that we were just looking at in the previous slide, who really need intensive supports. So they need good teaching in their classes. They need good core social and emotional supports. They need the additional supports that may come, but if they're out for a psychiatric hospitalization, if they've missed a bunch of time due to a concussion and they're really struggling coming back, then they have a period of time when they really need intensive supports in order to be successful. And what we see across the country is that the dropout rate for students who are in that intensive level and don't reach it is much, much higher than the typical dropout rate. So it's one of the greatest at-risk groups in our country. So our sense is that there's a need in a lot of schools for tier 3 supports for kids. And what happens is if there's not programming specifically structured for students at tier 3, we still have to work with those students. It's just that people whose jobs were designed for tier 1 and tier 2 end up spending inordinate amounts of time working with students at tier 3. So the challenges then that happen are students who are doing fine at tier 1 or tier 2 are the ones who are losing out in some ways. So the students at tier 3 are losing out because they're not getting structured, organized supports. And then the students at tier 1 and tier 2 are getting guidance counselors who can't really spend that much time with them because they have to be seeing the student in crisis over there, or just as one example. So what are these programs? Just real quick. They start with a customized planning process. Ideally, the staff will know as much as possible before the student comes back to school. If they're hospitalized, they'll try to connect with the reentry meeting, find out what the orders are. And then they'll really customize a plan for that student over the course of their time. Typically 8 to 12 weeks, in some cases shorter, in some cases longer. But the idea is every student in this kind of program, it's a small caseload, they'll have a customized supportive plan that gives them what they need to get back on track. Catch up academically, provide them with the social emotional supports, therapeutic supports needed to be fully caught up, finish the school year successfully on track for graduation. Just to say really simple, we think there's just a few key features of this model. Sometimes we call them the 3 S's. I don't have it that way here, but space, staff, and services. So the dedicated classroom is really important because what happens is we have a space open all day long every school day. A student who's really struggling has the opportunity to go to that classroom. Then we don't find them in the bathroom texting their parents to pick them up. Again, we don't find them looking for someone in the guidance office, finding the school nurse. They know that there's a space that's dedicated for them. It'll be friendly, supportive, and there's people who know them there. Dedicated staff, we think the most critical pieces are kind of program leadership that's often combined with a clinical support, someone who provides clinical supports to students, and then an academic coordinator. In some schools, that academic coordinator is a teacher. In others, it's an aide or a paraprofessional position. So, but those are kind of the 2 pieces. And then the supports are the academic support, which is some direct tutoring, but also quite a bit of talking with teachers, figuring out what is the catch-up path, again, for the student, what kinds of assignments can the student be doing that can allow them to catch up at the same time as they can stay on task with the curriculum moving forward. Clinical support, that'll be connecting with both maybe therapy that students getting outside of school, as well as providing on-demand supports right in the school. Care coordination, connecting with key providers both within the school and in the wider community to make sure that students' needs are met comprehensively. And then family support, communication with families, providing families with psychoeducation, other supports that they need. So that's what we see. When we see these three key features all in place, and we see these programs making a really big difference for kids. Just a few things about the program. So it's not that if a student's in the program for 8 to 12 weeks, they're not in the BRYT room for 8 to 12 weeks. In the first week, they might spend a few days kind of acclimating back to school, kind of figuring out what their plan is, reconnecting, and then maybe begin to go to 1 to 2 classes as part of their plan, and over time move toward a full schedule. So time in the regular classroom increases as time in the BRYT classroom decreases. And then just a little bit about data and impact. So we think that key statistic of 92% of students successfully completing the academic year is really important. So that was a evaluation study that was done over 3 years with 8 schools that were in the network. It was between 300 and 400 students in the BRYT program. So 92% finished the school year on track for graduation. And then just to note on the behavioral side that there's some real specific and supported goals and work with students, and that students report feeling supported as well as the families. So and we think that quite often by catching and supporting a student perhaps early in the course of their mental illness, we can really head off something that otherwise can really become a lifetime debilitating reality. So attendance goes up in programs in schools that have these programs. So you kind of see students over time kind of fading from school, or in some cases being out of school. The attendance rate upon return to school is 82 to 85% for the first 6 weeks in schools that have these programs. This is the CAFAS, the Child and Adolescent Functioning Academic Scale. So just to show, if you look at the 5 domains on the bottom, moods and emotions, school, self-harm, substance abuse, and home functioning, our evaluation study showed that statistically significant improvement over time from the moment they started in the BRYT program until they transitioned back into their classes. So meaningful improvement on attendance, meaningful outcomes academically, and meaningful outcomes kind of from a functioning and mental health standpoint. And then just to go back to the tiered system of support model, we really think that in addition to making a difference for the students at Tier 3, which is really powerful as we were just showing you, we also think that these programs can be a really powerful force in the school as a whole. So one thing that happens is as a student transitions out of the program, very often they have sort of like what's considered alumni status. A student might be back on their full schedule, doing well, but they might do their homeroom in the BRYT room because it's a good home base to start the day. A student who has difficulty in the cafeteria might, stop in and have their lunch in the BRYT room. So it sort of serves as a place that's a positive, supportive room for students who have been in the program in the past. And then what we're starting to see, and I was just saying to Ellen that at our monthly professional development session, the statewide session that we're having this week, for instance, there's a school, Westboro High, that's really, their program's it's like a phenomenal program, and it's pretty far along. And so that program, the team there is kind of pushing out. They run an after-school program for all students in the school that really kind of integrates socio-emotional supports with academic supports, not just for students in their transition program, for any student who can benefit. They also do skills groups for students who are not in their program but could benefit. So they have a population that's kind of high-performing, high anxiety, and they're doing skills support group to kind of manage their anxiety. They do stress management workshops with all of the juniors in their school as part of their health curriculum, and they do professional development for teachers, and they're starting to see teachers beginning to integrate mindfulness and sort of mental health kind of friendly things into their universal classroom. So we just think these programs, in addition to being really good for the kids that are in them, and being good for all kids because they free up staff to do the jobs that they were hired to do, we also think that they can really be a force for good around good mental health practice in the school and in the community. So that's it. I don't know how I did in terms of time, but wanted to put that out to you for questions for any of us.
So
At school committee, do we have any questions? I know,
I'm trying to articulate my
Bill,
question.
there were a number of questions.
So there were a number of
previous-
questions submitted both by Warrant and Advisory and some school committee members. So responses to those questions you should have. And we can revisit those when we get to the questions, but I think this is an opportunity to perhaps, if you want to focus on some of those questions, we can have a public commentary about those. But if you have specific
Okay.
questions for Paul, we could do that.
All right, thank you. So questions will be up here, and then eventually we'll open for some additional comments. Richard and then Dana.
First of all, thank you. It's great to see the presentation. You've obviously seen a lot of these being instituted, and they've been around long enough so that maybe the answer to this question is clear, and that's about costs and also savings within those same districts. What do you know in the large picture? We've seen a budget for ours, but what do you know about whether there are any, if there are any savings in other places as a result of instituting these programs?
Sure. So just to say, I think you know this, but you are, I believe, blessed to be in the Metro West region of the state. It's the Metro West Health Foundation has made a serious commitment to seed funding these programs and making school possible for schools to kind of start them and then assume funding gradually over time. And they've become the norm in high schools, particularly in this region of the state, I think very much due to the Metro West Health Foundation, so I would be remiss not to call them out. I think the place where we see funding savings is when a district is able, either rather than sending a student out to out-of-district placement for an intensive special education need, particularly related to intensive mental health supports, or to bring students back. So there's one program in the state that I know of, specifically where they actually decided to start up a program based on the realization that with these supports in schools, they would be able to reintegrate 2 students from out-of-district placements, and those are expensive out-of-district placements that are basically paying for the 2 staff members in the program. So I don't know about your district's kind of situation around out-of-district placements, but that's one place where, we're seeing cost savings. And then I think, the other piece is there's kind of a burnout savings, I think, on staff when they're able to kind of continue working with students, but have the support of students at the tier 3. But I think it's in the realm of separated special education, particularly out of district placements, that some districts are seeing savings.
Can you help? Great presentation, by the way. Thank you so much. I'm curious, how would you help us articulate what makes this a must-have program versus just a nice-to-have program for our school?
Do you want me to take that? Sure. Okay. For me, it's back to that notion that all means all. So sometimes I think about it and I think, so I look at that 100 students and I think, so one of those is my student. My daughter, my nephew, a student that I particularly care about as a staff member or teacher in this school. And this is the program that at a crucial moment, at a make it or break it moment in their life, can make the difference as to whether they're able to integrate, finish the school year, be on track for graduation, or whether they either get off track, end up repeating a school year, end up dropping out in some cases, and I think it's a program that supports students. It's intensive. It's designed to be intensive, to have intentionally small caseloads at the moment of highest need. And also at a time in our country when I think in many ways, unfortunately, we're seeing increasing numbers of students really struggling with serious anxiety and serious mental health challenges. And I can't purport to, explain why that is, but I think, all of what we see now is that the challenge of students who are really, really struggling and need additional supports is, I don't think there's any reason to think it's going to go away. So I think if we're serious, I guess you would ask me, if we're serious that all means all, that we're going to do what it takes to get every student in our school to be successful, this is one key part of that formula.
And I think you got to the second part of my question is, what has changed? So, I mean, we have been pretty fortunate. I think historically we don't have big dropout numbers. We don't have, I don't think, big repeat numbers. So I don't know whether that just means that everything goes into stress because it's not being relieved in more tangible ways. So what has changed? Because obviously this is not something that we've had in place over time, and maybe it just is that the numbers of incidents that we would be seeing.
Yeah, again, I don't have that kind of like, historical take, in your district. I can speak about, schools across the state and some schools that have been pretty high functioning schools that, there's a small set of students that, you sort of see speaking now, students who are now in law school, students who are now in other places, and who look back and say, if that program hadn't existed, I don't know where I would have been. And so so that's what I can say. I can't, I can't speak specifically to, either students in this district or numbers in this district.
No, yeah, I knew that. I just meant in general.
John, did you want to?
Yeah, I can just say that for students in this district, what we are seeing is they are not receiving the same Dover-Sherborn experience. So in some cases with some of these students, we've had to supplement maybe an online course or two, or they've done some tutorial work, or they've done some different things, but they're not having those traditional experiences that our kids are blessed to have here with the resources our community has, with talented teachers, with great programs. And in some cases, Ellen and I have had to make difficult decisions where we maybe waive something for them because we just know there's no way that they could achieve their goal of graduating. And then at the end of it, I feel as though for some of these kids, they are not having all of those same types of opportunities that other students have. And it's something that is somewhat out of their control, whether it's a mental health issue, multiple concussions. And I feel that, as Paul had said, all means all. And a program like this, I feel, would give us an opportunity to provide that same experience and certainly provide a much greater depth and breadth to their educational experience instead of piecemealing it.
And so how do we know when it's working? And is that a year, 2 years, 3 years? What does that feel like maybe for us?
Sure. So I think, there's so many levels of, of responses to that question. I think, at one level, I believe partly, things are working because you hear from, maybe indirectly from students and families who have benefited from the program, or in some cases directly, that it's been good for their child and it's made a difference for them. That you hear from both staff and teachers and leaders in the school that they see the program making a difference and, allowing students to have, the kinds of experiences that Mr. Smith is talking about. And then I think, I think the question of the kinds of available data, I think are important. I don't have the comparative data. I have the data that sort of folks here identified as like students who have missed significant amounts of school, sort of due to these challenges. What that return to school has looked like for them, and from a data perspective, how that can be better. I think part of the work is to kind of set indicators that would be community specific that would allow to do that. When part of what I'm hearing is maybe it's not going to show up so much on sort of like raw kind of as it were dropout or retention data. But I think we can look at speed of return to full-time schedule. I think we can, I think we can look at grades. I think we can look at the kinds of courses that students are completing and, what their academic outcomes are.
Thank you. Richard? Or Michael? Either one.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking. A couple of questions. We're obviously on the smaller end of schools that have these things. I know from the numbers we've seen, we're not smaller than everybody else. I'm wondering what you've seen in these programs in terms of both the threshold costs, and are we looking at what really the minimum for this kind of program? And then does it modularize after that? Are there economies of scale after that? Where are our costs relative to what this program costs generally for
So the core model, so like the classic model of the program, as as we call it, will call for that one staff member who's some version of a mental health professional and program leader. In some cases, it's a school social worker. In some cases, it's an adjustment counselor. In some cases, it might be a psychologist, but someone who's there. And then another person to play that academic coordination role. And again, in some cases, might be a teacher, might be an aide or a paraprofessional. And then there'll be startup costs, depending on what the school decides to do with the space, provisioning the room and sort of, et cetera. And then one way to think about it is those costs remain fixed. And on that classic model, then there's going to be a similar fixed cost for a school of 670 compared to a school of 1,000, let's say. Several of the larger schools, Brookline High, getting my Boston suburbs confused. Another one of the W's. They'll have two. We'll have two clinicians and as well as the academic coordinator. So in some cases, programs grow bigger, and then there are a few schools that kind of have sort of provide some of these services with non-dedicated staff, and what we've seen there is not that it's not doable, but that the challenge is that in some ways, like, it just doesn't depart that much from the typical model, because what will very often happen is they'll maybe hire a clinician or a part-time clinician, and they'll expect that person to do the academic coordination, but then that person ends up being like very much sucked into doing the academic coordination because students want and need and expect the academic coordination support. And then they won't really be able to engage with the students clinically, and that kind of, that'll both like slow down the process, and then that's where we see also a revolving door for clinical staff, because, they're looking for jobs where they feel like they can be effective in the kinds of roles that they were trained for, and have been hired for. And so we feel like, there may be ways to cut corners, here and there, but I think to run a fully comprehensive program, we really would argue that having those two dedicated staff really makes a difference. And then the other thing I would say is it also then allows the program where once a baseline is set, kind of like things are figured out and the program's moving forward, it then allows the program to potentially begin, as I was saying, to have an impact on the school at other levels and to be integrated into the school. So it's almost like maybe in a smaller school, the program can impact up, as it were. And that's sometimes like the way I think it might be helpful to think about it. Instead of, can we cut it down proportionally, rather, can we think, here's a powerful program, it can really be connected with good things in our school, and what impact can it have, once it sort of like is meeting the baseline of kids in a smaller school, what kinds of other impact can it have around supporting students academically as well as social emotionally. That's the way I think about it.
Michael?
So, and this isn't to Paul, this is more to John and the guidance staff. I guess I was expecting as part of this presentation to see some tangible data going back several years that would indicate actual censuses of students who had either the psychological issues that would trigger inclusion into this program, and then also the physical injuries and concussion. And to understand, has this been a growing issue, or is this a plateau of a need that we have never, concretely addressed in this way before? And I also think that there's some longitudinal data from Metro West Health Survey around mental health issues that I think would be interesting to see as part of this conversation. So I don't know if that's...
Yes, certainly. So one of the indicators with the Youth Risk Survey, we have in fact seen an increase in the number of students expressing anxiety, depression, and that has continued to climb. In terms of our data, we did our year zero data. Was that shared with school committee?
Last month, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is that data of students and sort of cases. Ellen and I today were reviewing a couple of tutorial situations, and we came across a couple situations where two students equated to about $8,000 worth of tutoring costs. Where those students could have been integrated back into this program had the DS experience instead of being really out of school predominantly with some help and support. The difficulty that students face today, not only is the tutoring not going to be at the same level as that direct instruction, they start to then develop real concerns and anxiety around returning to school. You know, there's an inherent pressure here that exists in high-performing schools where if you fall behind, will I not measure up? Will I not measure up to myself, to my peers, to my parents, to the community, etc.? That just exists, and it's real. And I think that that we are seeing a continuing growing piece, and I think one of our other programs, Challenge Success, has really kind of looked at that to say, you know, how do we work with that? These are students who go sort of far beyond some of the programming that Challenge Success can offer, such as homework-free weekends.
I understand the
Right.
distinction. I was just trying to get a better sense of, is this a growing issue?
Yes.
And it would be, I guess, going and taking the year zero data and going -1, -2, -3, -4, just getting a little bit better of a baseline, because then we would know, both from a standpoint of Challenge Success and for this program, have we reversed an adverse trend, or have we taken a plateau situation and actually had it come down? The clear demonstrated benefits that would have for our community. And I think there's also, again, data within the Metro West Health Survey around suicide attempts and ideation and a whole variety of mental health factors that I would be curious again to see what it looks like on a longitudinal basis. Because I think that's survey's been going on for 8 years
Correct,
now,
and we
10
have in
years at
fact
least.
presented that data, correct? Yeah, the
But
data.
we only get it in at
year
one
at a
point
time.
at a time. We don't see, are things getting worse, is it plateaued, all over the place? Another question I would have is, of our psychologists that we currently have on staff, how much of their time is currently spent with students who would be envisioned to be in this, in this program?
I mean, I can ask, maybe Ellen can figure, percentage-wise, that might be tricky just to come up with something, but I can tell you that because they are our greatest concerns, they become the first focus. So looking at the tiered interventions, they become the major focus because they are primarily in crisis, unless we have, some piecemeal plans in place. Yet, I mean, we've got a number of students that our counselors are addressing issues every day. They're spending some time every day with one student.
That was going to be a follow-up around the specific guidance counselors, but my understanding is we have a 1 FTE of a psychologist on staff, at least in our budget. Where is the if we establish this program, what's the impact of that person's workload?
You mean the adjustment
You
counselor?
mean adjustment counselors?
No,
We have a psychologist,
Chris, it's name is
high school
special ed.
psychologist.
Yeah,
I think Chris
they do most of
can
the
speak to
testing.
that.
Yeah. Our school psychologist functions as a 1.0 for the region and is engaged in the testing and evaluation procedures for special education. So the initials and reevaluations, and that takes her about almost 100 evaluations in the school year.
So that person's workload is 100% directly related to supporting special ed. None of these other general ed overall population.
Correct. Although I could say that students that aren't able to get the support through a program like this end up in the special education pipeline and do end up testing.
No,
So
I
we
can
see
see
that.
where
We see that.
this could be a precursor for cases.
Just two quick things. One, for a second, I was like, wow. In most districts, psychologists are almost entirely dedicated to testing, and I was like, wow, if they could be really dedicated to teaching students, like, that would be really amazing. But I think also, I just want to thank you for the question about year -1, year -2, year -3. Now, I think it's really a great question. I think as I talk with principals and school leaders across the state, you got to be careful. They kind of we invented this year 0 because it felt like really important to have some data. Because for a long time, programs schools were starting these programs because they were just experiencing the need is so acute that, they just knew they needed these programs and they were starting. And we've been trying to say, okay, let's be orderly and let's use data. And so Dover-Sherborn is one of the first schools that we went through the year zero data process with. And so I'm gonna quote you. I'm gonna say, now you need to do a year -1, year -2, year -3 in order to make this work.
Check their website for your quote.
So, and John and Ellen's got her hand up, and it seems to me that and many of our guidance staff and adjustment counselors are here tonight, that they're spending, as you said, a great deal of time trying to manage the issues of these 67 students. And by having this new program that's focused on those particular needs, it doesn't free up time in their day, but it allows them to perhaps allocate time differently,
That is correct.
which, again,
Yeah,
is significant for all, significant for all
That's a huge
students.
benefit because
Yeah.
there's
There's a
only
potential for more proactive work to be done instead of reactive, and starting to work our way into the tier 2s. And then obviously there's work that our guidance counselors do with the tier 1s with their guidance curriculum. And that takes place anyways. But I think our adjustment counselors in grades 6 to 12 could then really do a lot more
Really,
focusing with
yeah.
our tier 2s.
Do we have any further school committee questions?
I guess one last one. which
Okay,
is-
and then I was gonna open up.
I'm not sure if
Anyone
you're
else?
familiar with our work with the Challenge Success Program, but is there a way to take, again, skill sets and expertise that is in the BRYT program and Challenge Success and somehow leverage that so that we have a greater impact across the board with, again, being proactive and anticipating and avoiding these types of mental health breakdowns that seem to be
Sure, so
present.
the folks who work in the school will know the specifics of that better than me. I think the one thing that I will say about that is, I hope this has come clear, we don't see the programs that we support as a cookie cutter duplication program. In fact, we really believe, quite differently that schools who are interested in starting these programs have existing both needs that are specific to their communities and to the profiles of their students, and they have assets as well that are specific to their communities and their needs. And so we really think that it's really, really important to be thinking, what are the assets, and then how does this program support and build on and coordinate and align with those assets. And so I don't know the program that you're talking about in particular, but it's one of the strongest things that we really encourage is to think where the natural, cheesy word I pause, but where are the natural synergies and how are we being intentional to make sure that they're happening.
I like when you said that when the program is set, then you can have an impact up. And for Challenge Success, Michael, in particular, it would be, say, for example, the mindfulness piece that we're really starting to work on. That would be a wonderful universal application of that Tier 1 group. So I think it would meld nicely.
Do we have any audience questions? Ellen, you had your hand
I just
raised.
wanted to comment on, Mr. Lee, you had said about kind of like the amount of time between counselors and adjustment counselors and that type of thing. And I think what ends up happening, and they can comment, I want to put words in their mouth, is that the student takes up the time of both. So there's the adjustment counselor, which is needed for that clinical piece, as well as the guidance counselor who's doing the academic piece, as well as trying to do the seminars and everything else. So being an inordinate amount of time for those really acute cases that can have, multiple times per week, just with follow-up checking with teachers, getting the work and helping the child kind of feel it's manageable, as well as supporting the child if they're having a really tough day or morning or whatever it might be. So I just wanted to comment that sometimes it's 2 staff members to help these acute cases.
Thank you.
Actually, I have a question,
Richard, go right
but I
ahead.
don't want to preempt anybody else. First of all, thank you all for coming. Can I see a show of hands? Who works for guidance here? That's what I thought. Thank you very much. Given the extraordinary meeting of the minds we have here, I wonder if I could just ask a question that I'm sure puzzles all of you as well. Why do we have so much anxiety among these kids? And where does it start?
And we have a lot of money for the person who knows the answer.
Well, no, I don't. I mean, I assume many of you have ideas about that, and you may not want to share them, and I understand that if you don't, but it seems as though it is the fundamental challenge of the high school years that doesn't begin in high school. And I kind of wonder what you guys think, and whether, in fact, I mean, sounds like a very worthy program and a very expensive program, whether we really ought to be thinking about spending other money elsewhere so that we have less of this problem, because we sure have a lot of it. Who wants to go first?
I think that some of it is resiliency, that children in today's world, whether it's the parents get involvement with them, and I'm a parent and I know I sometimes get involved too much. So whether it's that piece that our children haven't learned resiliency, it's the negotiating that children years ago used to go outside and play ball and learn how to negotiate, navigate with each other. With technology and kids being inside and everyone having their own TV and their own Xbox, and that piece is not there as much. So I think that's a part of it. Kids are plugged in, and I think that is a big piece of it as well. So yes, I think there could be some education, but I think the challenge success is focusing a lot on that. This takes kids that maybe have anxiety and that because of all these things gets exacerbated, and helps them to get back into the model of the school, to take advantage of the different things. What we see is that a lot of the kids that maybe had a small thing, but because they're out, it gets exacerbated, and then they get school phobic and don't want to come because they have to go right back to class when they feel completely lost, whereas this program will help take care of that. So I think it will decrease the number of absences overall, as well as the tutoring budget dramatically, because we'll get them back in quicker as well. And eventually, I think also the special ed referrals and outplacements. That's the biggest thing, and whether it's mental health or anxiety, even concussion kids, we've seen them being out and being anxious, and a lot of times those kids actually, it ties in and their anxiety gets connected to that as well, or already existed.
Ellie?
This program will provide a safe place for kids who are suffering, who for one reason or another, whether or not it be a medical or emotional issue, this is a place where they can come and get the support they need and slowly integrate back in a way, in a manner that they can do it, rather than us piecemealing their education and piecemealing all different parts, pulling from wherever we can. This way, we are back in control. We are in a place where we can help the kids. Where, as counselors, we can also then help the kids who we haven't been able to help because we're taking our time and the adjustment counselor's time to be rightfully so with a kid in crisis. So this will give us time to, spend more time with the other kids. I mean, I want to know all my kids. And sometimes I can't get to know all of them that as well as I want to because our time is being split. And this is an amazing program that I've heard your math, and I think it's back out. It's not that expensive. It's not going to be in the long run because we're going to be taking care of some kids. And we are an amazing system, and it is for all students in the school.
Thanks, Ellie. Kathy, and then...
So I'm gonna ask the different question in one go first. You go through. Yeah.
So I'm at the middle school. So it's really great to listen to all this, and then you have on that other side, like, ooh, do I get to reap the benefits of a great program like this? I had a student last year, just as an example, and I have one this year as well. I had 2 last year. So I clock everything that I do all day long. I had 82 days with the child. That's not including almost 30 absences for the child. And when we say we've tried a lot, prior to referring to a BRYT program, that's outside consultants meeting with them, multiple parent meetings. I missed 15 team meetings in 7th grade last year as a result of one student, which is not that child's fault, but the child in my mind would come first. So if there's a child in your office versus a team meeting, granted the team meeting is benefiting a handful of kids, that child will always come first. And I think a lot of what sometimes gets lost is the amount of encouragement and work we do with families to get outside supports, whether it be family therapy or individual therapy. a lot of families don't follow through with that, but we have no control over that. So as much as we can connect to outside resources or consult with outside people, we don't drive the child to outside therapy. So there could be other things that could be helpful. That child still needs to be educated on a day-to-day basis. So I think that just in my experience, I feel like it's an awful feeling to know that you don't have what the child needs, and you go to your coworker who's an adjustment counselor who might have the skills, but they're being pulled to another kid at the high school who needs that counselor. So it's like this trickle effect from the middle school to high school. And Heidi and Kara, like, God bless them. I mean, they have too many kids on their caseload. And I have a background in LMHC, so that's licensed mental health counselor. So I have those skills, but I don't have the time to use them. I can't speak highly enough about it, and the amount of research that Ellen and Heidi and the department has done is phenomenal. And no matter what happens, I'm never gonna turn that kid down at my door for any reason. But there are other kids that could benefit from the help that we're not getting to.
Thank you.
So I just, if we assume just for a moment that this is potentially a very valuable program that could benefit a group of kids in our school system, my question to the school committee and the administrators is it possible to conceptualize that if this program was to go forward, that there was a very clear number of things, as you mentioned, that are tracked for these students, so that retrospectively it will be clear what kind of resources are being used and how many tutoring hours happen. And I'm not saying a big, monthly log report, but I just think that if this is to be supported on a grant, and then come back for conversation at another time about being supported through the school budget, it could be very useful to have data that shows for the high profile cases, not profile, but for the high intense cases, what are the resources that staff are actually expending? And then how does that, how quickly do kids get back to school? Some of the variables that are being addressed here, I just think it would give you guys potentially more information to have to kind of judge ongoing, not necessarily the success, but just what are the resources that this cohort needs, and then be able to evaluate, are we feeling better about meeting their needs? So that's just something to consider, because I think that when you stand up at town hall and you say the budget is being increased by a certain amount and it has to, you want to also be able to say if in fact this is where it goes, and we're going to be evaluating it, and this is our plan, so that if it doesn't seem to be working, we will reassess in a year, and if it does seem to be working, when we come back and have to pay a little more out of pocket, we would feel confident that it's working at DS. So I'm thinking very pragmatic.
Thank you, Kathleen. Michael?
Based upon what I just heard, do any of these programs address some of these situations at the middle school level? And do we have data again on the rate of incidence among children grades 6 through 8 versus the 9 through 12?
Yeah, so okay. First, quick thing to your question, Mr. Robinson. So I think what some of the literature now is saying, I mean, the question you asked is like a really big and huge and important question, like why is this happening? I think one cause, I think, is being put, social media, I think, is being seen as a huge thing. I think it's the idea for young people now that they're just never not experiencing public exposure, and I think like that's just created a whole. Part of what the literature is saying is that's just creating a whole new set of experiences that in some cases, if I think of a traumatic event as something that is so, it's just too much for me to handle, it's beyond my capacity, and so it pushes me into a place where I shut down. In some ways, I think some of the thinking is that just a constant experience, of exposure, fear of being shamed, kind of like dealing along with, a lot of other pressures that young people experience is like the thing that's pushing kids over. I'm not sure that that's true or not, but I think like that's what we're kind of seeing in a lot of the literature. Then to get to the question of tracking, just a couple pieces. One is part of what we offer at a more simple level is HIPAA and FERPA compliant student database. Is very, very simple to use, that allows programs to track kind of a whole bunch of both student demographics and then kind of like functioning kind of status when they enter the program and then when they exit the program. And there's an opportunity in there to kind of take progress notes for people who want to do that. But it'll allow the program in real time to have those kinds of statistics that we showed earlier, the kind of like how kids were doing when they left compared to how they entered, and et cetera. And then we can see those, not individual student data, but aggregated data at the state level, and then it creates sort of like push button graphs, so that's really easy for folks to kind of track at any time, over any given time period, how kids so far this year, kids this year compared to last year, et cetera. So that's one piece. And then secondly, I think that question of tracking program utilization is very important. And so there's a whole set of schools in the network that have really worked on that, and there's kind of different online versions of, you know, what we might think of most generically as a Google Doc, where it's really like there's the actual tracking of both like assignment completion, who's helping students complete those assignments, what kind of support they're getting, you know, kind of like down to that very, very granular level. And I think part of the kind of level of program design that the team here would do would be decide both what kind of those tracking devices it would use, and then also which are the most important indicators that you would want to study. And then thirdly, to the middle school question, so yeah, there are 4 school-based middle school programs now, 3 that have started in the last year, and a 4th that's starting in Northborough in the next month or so. And so traditionally it was a high school level program. Now we're starting to see middle schools you know, take on this work. And I think what we're finding is the work at middle school is different in the sense of students in some ways are at a different developmental level, that the way student progress is assessed at middle school is a little bit different. We tend to think about standards rather than credits on the academic side. And then also, I think some of the districts are feeling like what, you know, to your point, in some cases, the real challenges do start showing themselves at middle school. And there are cases where I think some districts are feeling like having a middle school program is starting to allow them to intervene and then really to be, you know, to be linking and to be preventing at an earlier level. So in the one district in the state that has programs at both middle and high school now is Hopkinton, which is, you know, not too far away if folks wanted to learn more about that. And then there's some kind of 6 to 12 schools that also are in various stages of planning.
Well, I don't see any other questions. So I can't say enough about how informative this is, and we have talked over the last couple of years about how do we address these needs. So I thank everyone who has been involved in bringing this before us tonight. It's a great program, and I hope we see it succeed here.
Can I ask you one more question?
Carol.
Yeah, hi. I just have another thought about an interesting way of tracking the success of this program for future sort of budget requests. As someone who'd been on Guidance Advisory Council for many years while my kids were at the schools, we often heard a concern from certain parents that the guidance office did not spend enough time with students on college prep. And I think we can all understand why that happens, because they're being pulled in so many directions, especially with these kids that have the critical needs. And so I think it would be interesting to sort of evaluate how much more time the guidance counselors are spending on academic work with students and college prep. And again, when you're thinking about budgeting, maybe that will obviate the need for additional college support. So I don't know how that would be tracked. I don't know, you know, if there's a good mechanism for that, but I think it's just a different way of looking at it when we talk about how this program will trickle down and help the entire student body.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for your time.
Paul.
Staff,
Yeah, thank you
Thank
guys.
you very much.
It's great
You're
to see you
welcome
all here.
anytime.
Stick around.
It's an exciting agenda, so please feel free to stick around.
My flash drive.
Oh, there it is. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Claire, if I could introduce. So we do have one more formal presentation, and this presentation is related to some proposals we have really around special education programming, and in one case, a different perspective or view on how we deliver, in particular, BCBA services on a district-wide level. I would like to make an initial comment that we've been talking, certainly internally, and every now and then at school committee meetings, we've talked about the possibility that the administration might be presenting some more special education reorganization adjustment proposals. And we've had an opportunity over the last 2 months internally to really talk about that. We've even talked about some ideas. In the end, we've come to the conclusion that given some of the transitions that are happening in the district, and really because we're in a place now where we have some positive things really happening. We have a new special education director who's been here for 6 months now. And so we've decided that in terms of the organizational structure, we are not going to be presenting any proposals for changing to that structure. It will remain as it is now going into next year. That's not to say that after additional time, perhaps at the next budget cycle, there may be some proposals coming forward. What we've decided is that the real priority for special education in district is to look at programming that will best serve the needs of students who are currently in the district, and hopefully will best serve the needs of some students who are currently out of district. And because we have if we're able to expand, in particular, 2 programs, we'll have the opportunity to come back and experience their education in their hometown at TS. And we think that alone has a tremendous amount of value, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So Chris is going to make this formal presentation, and I think, like the last presentation, we'll have an opportunity to then ask questions and discuss what you've heard and seen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
So it's been an exciting 6 months for me as I've become a part of the Dover-Sherborn schools. I've participated in many conversations about the strengths and the needs of our school, and tonight's proposal speaks to my findings and what we do well and what we want to improve. So with that, we'll begin. We have a program at the region that provides services to our students with language-based learning disabilities. Students in this program will typically qualify for special education as a student with a specific learning disability in the area of reading, reading comprehension, reading fluency, or written language. Additionally, these students often participate fully in the general ed classes but require supports on tasks that are language rich. Students are then instructed in small group for reading fluency, decoding, comprehension strategies, executive functioning, and organization. In order to understand the need for an additional teacher for the LBLD program, it's important to understand the history of that program, the matriculation of students, and the avoidance of additional costs from the OOD students out of district. As you can see from this slide, in 2013, a very small program was started at the high school to bring 2 students back to the district. Each year the program has grown, and we believe some costs have been avoided. In 2015-16, the program expansion required the addition of 2 educational assistants in order to continue to support the students in the gen ed settings. We have done this well, and we find we're in need of additional expansion. When I began in July of this year, of last year, 2016, we were in the process of losing 4 students to out-of-district placements because our program at the high school in particular didn't span enough of the gen ed classes. By adding an additional teacher for next year, we would be able to fully ensure the application of the LBLD strategies across all content areas. So we are requesting a cost increase of $66,000 for next year to fund an additional LBLD teacher at the region. This would provide a venue for the return of up to 5 students at the region. Currently, we have about 9 students out of district that could participate in a life skills classroom at the region. A student that would be appropriate for this type of a program is a student that is identified as a student with a disability of autism, intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, or neurological disabilities. These students require a modified curriculum, instruction in life skills and vocational instruction, and are not typically earning in the family. We currently have a very small program at the middle school, and we have an interest in expanding this to the high school for at least 1 student that is currently out of district. It's our hope to expand this program over time by demonstrating its success through the success of students, including their academic and vocational successes, their engagement in the whole school community, and their successful transition into adult opportunities. We are requesting a cost increase of $66,000 for next year to fund an additional life skills teacher at the region. This would provide a venue for the return of students at the region and reduce the flow of students to out-of-district programs from the elementary school as students transition from the elementaries to the region. Currently, our board-certified BCBA consultants, who are our highly qualified educators that provide service, behavior consultation to the special education teams, and some direct service to students, are at our elementary schools. As we expand our continuum of service for students with complex needs, it is imperative that we approach and model a service delivery that demonstrates consistent programming and the consistent delivery of service. Our request is to create 1 district-wide BCBA at 1.0 FTE. By moving this position to a single employee in a district-wide position, we hope to establish that strong continuum of service and delivery so that students, families, and teachers find greater growth in their students.
And there, we estimate there's no cost to this particular realignment. Actually, on a pre-K to 12 perspective, the FTE would actually decrease from a current staffing of 1.2 to the district-wide staff full-time 1.0. Chris, can you just speak to what is on the screen in terms of current FTE staffing at both Chickering and Pine Hill, and the caseload, and how that may look, how when you compare the caseload to the FTEs, somebody might be thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
So caseload is often a tricky point of reference. It's not a great data point for information because you could have a student that represents a higher level of need than another student, but they each count as, as singularly as one as you're counting caseloads, and that's actually what that represents there. So you see that happening. So that's what that little tiny asterisk down the bottom indicates, is that the caseload isn't really, it's not really a great data point.
Right. So what you haven't seen and you will see at the next meeting, and what all 3 committees will see as we go through this budget process, is there'll be a reallocation of the current resources, which will result in some reduction at the 2 elementary schools. There would be a slight addition to the high school. And the way this is presented, and Chris can explain this better than I can, but The model of a full-time pre-K-12 person, again, to underscore what Chris said, provides consistency and a continuum, a consistent continuum of services pre-K-12, which we want to make sure we have in place as our students move through the district that require these services. But that the projected FTE and caseload, as we know, those are likely to change. So having this one person who is assigned K-12, as the caseloads change and as the needs change, that individual will be able to adjust and be flexible in how those services are provided.
So currently, the .8 FTE and the .4 FTE at the two elementaries.
Correct.
Those are distinctly different people. Are they salaried employees? Are they outside contractors? How is that?
They're both salaried employees. The Pine Hill employee actually is a full-time employee but has a split role. So 0.6 of their time is as a pre-K teacher. The other 0.4 as our BCBA there, and the .8 at Chickering is a part-time teacher.
I don't know whether you know this or maybe you know this, you, on the previous two slides, the 66,000 there, and then the next one was, I guess the figure's not there.
Same figure.
Same figure. And these are two different individuals, am I right? Yeah, okay, so two different requests for same money. And you mentioned the potential savings on out-of-district costs as well. Do you have any analysis, at least for next year, about whether we're looking at a wash, a savings, of what, in other words, 66 minus what?
So I think that at the region, we have a request for out-of-district students to return to district, and there would be a tuition savings comparative to the cost of the teacher compared to the tuition spent on that student.
If that was the answer to my question, I'm sorry I missed it. Just say it.
Cost neutral.
Cost neutral, in other words.
Benefit.
Oh, no, it could be a
Benefit,
savings, so it's an out-of-placement
However,
return.
right. However, the complication in that calculation is that the savings, which in that case, which we think is highly probable, accrues to the Dover out-of-district budget, and those resources, and the $66,000 then becomes part of the region budget, which that cost is then shared by the two communities. With the, but we believe that if you look at just the dollars that are involved, there's a savings. With the language-based program, again, there are no guarantees for students who are currently out of district coming back, but we believe that there's an opportunity there in establishing this second program, which then really provides a continuum of a middle school program with those students moving to the high school program, a structure that more parents will support. I think more parents are looking for, and makes sense now given the size of the regional program from a structural standpoint and an academic standpoint in particular, that will make it a more attractive program for students to come back. I believe clearly if we don't experience the return of all of those students, maybe two, we would recoup perhaps 50% of the cost, depending on who the students are. But I really believe that this is an initiative that provides a really positive cost avoidance situation for the future, so that as students matriculate from the elementary school to the middle school, we will have fewer, hopefully none, students whose parents really are looking for an out-of-district program as opposed to their student continuing to
If I can just follow up with that. So I understood everything you said, thank you. And I kind of understand even the district versus Dover funding, although these things, it's a perverse set of incentives that we are dealing with. And I'm wondering whether there are models for regional systems anywhere else in the state that grapple with that, because the incentive for a region is to say, no, thank you, Dover, go deal with it. But that's A, it's wrong educationally, and B, it's stupid. So
It's not legal either. You need to do least restrictive environment.
I understood on that point as well, although there's some gray there, obviously. So the question is, does anybody care about this? And is there some way that people have thought to deal with resolving those incentives so that we're not forced to consider the question of whether Sherborn gets charged in a way that is the right thing to do?
Yeah, so I don't have a specific answer to that. My sense is that other districts that are organized, most likely other union districts that have a superintendency union, struggle and grapple with this same issue. I think it's helpful for members of the Regional School Committee, members of the Dover School Committee, members of the Sherborn School Committee, members of the Dover Warrant Committee, and the Sherborn Advisory Committee to think about this both prospectively but historically as well. One of the reasons that on the language-based slide, we noted that in 13-14, when the language-based program was first initiated at the region, it was Sherborn that benefited financially from establishing that program because 2 students came back out of district to the tune of about $92,000. And for that FY14 budget year, Dover participated in their share of the dollars that were budgeted at the region. So while in this case, it happens to be with the highly potential student for the life skills program, it will be Dover that benefits. We really do believe that if the life skills program becomes as successful in terms of drawing numbers, although it will never draw the kind of numbers the language-based program will, just because of the raw numbers, that the population, but that prospectively, there will be cost avoidance opportunities for continuing in Dover and certainly for Sherborn.
Bill, the Chris, I'm not sure who, the 66,000 salary, is that, we expect to be able to hire a teacher at that? I mean, I know sometimes we put something in the budget and then we go out and it's hard to find someone.
Yeah, that's based on a Master's 7.
Okay,
Current
so
Master's
that's
7.
significant.
So someone with experience that has their master's degree.
So we had several financial schedules tonight of different program options. What I'm seeing is consistently, we're only seeing salary, and there's no estimated average benefit cost load. And I really do think we need to get to the stage where when we were looking at these proposals, it's got to be an all-in cost. Now, not 100% of the people always take the most expensive family plan, but most organizations work off of what's your current FTE?
Fully loaded.
Yeah, what's your current healthcare costs, and come up with some averages on that, and other miscellaneous.
Yeah, indirectly we sort of pick that up because we budget in healthcare for plan changes, so part of that is in there.
But when we're looking for like, when we're saying, we're offsetting this impact in out of district or whatever. And I saw this come up a while back when it was pre-K at Pine Hill. It just wasn't done, and their cost benefit analysis were not accurate.
Can I ask a qualitative question? If we build it, do they come? So how do we know that we put together a program that will actually entice students to either stay or come back? Because I know it's anecdotally, just the chatter that I've heard over the past few years is, well, you can put that program in place, but my kid's not coming back. And so how do you manage the quality that entices them to actually stay here?
I think that does happen, but I don't think that you would ever win in a BSEA hearing if you didn't have a program to demonstrate. So, and the best place to start a program is with a parent who wants their child to stay in district. And so there you have your first student to demonstrate the success of the program. And we have that in Dover-Sherborn. We have that rich and fabulous person who's decided that they believe in the Dover-Sherborn school system and is engaged in staying and wants very much to stay. And that affords you the opportunity to build that program and have a defensible program. And that's what it really starts as.
That's the life skills program, the one that you're referring to?
Right, and what about on the reading side? So why, the 4 students who left as you were coming in, I mean, I'm not asking for an accounting of why, but in general, how do we know that we have a program that would have kept those 4 students here, for example?
So my 6 months has involved conversations about what has, where that program needs to grow. And I think that the ways that program needs to grow align with why the kids left the district. We will be able to provide more language-based strategy collaboration in the gen ed setting in the content areas of the high school, which we haven't been able to do as rich in the past.
Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, please go ahead.
What that last sentence means, apply it in more content areas. Does that mean, for example, we've all been able to apply it maybe in English, not in science and history? Is that specifically what you're saying?
Exactly. Or, we're targeting maybe 1 English class, whereas we really need to be able to target, 3 or 4 in the English department, and now you have more of a collaborative and consultative response to the language-based, so that teacher is not just coming in and doing service for that one child, but is having engaged in conversation about approaches to language-based, a language-based approach to making the curriculum accessible to the student from its delivery, not just to that individual child.
Michael?
At our elementaries right now, is this population typically going out of district, or have you the mix of language-based special educators that is keeping the students in district? And do we have estimates of what the populations are?
Yeah, in my time, Michael, I can say that what I'm seeing is that fleeing from the district, that the transition to the region. And so that's where we want to put our first focus, is just supporting the growth at the region. And then I think we need to look back to the elementaries and make sure that we're doing enough there.
Do we have a sense of what our pipeline is in grades 3 to 5?
That will feed into the region?
Yeah, that we can envision over the next several years, or we'll be wanting, in a sense, our objective to retain as close to 100%.
So students are typically identified with this area of disability until 3rd grade. And so it's a snapshot of time. You can't really go back to the pre-K arena, right? So you're looking at 3rd grade to 5th grade, and I can tell you that we definitely have a population of students that will sustain the need.
But not a specific number, we just know that it's there.
Correct, because you have to allow for their growth and development, and that elementary model is just different than the middle school model. So they're still very connected to their inclusion classes. They're in those.
Yeah, my experience has been, certainly there are some outliers, and it's not to say that we never have, either at Chickering or Pine Hill or in other elementary schools across the state, it's not to say you never have a student with that profile that is in an out-of-district placement, but in the majority of cases, again, my experience has been that there's a continuum that builds during those grades 3, 4, and 5 that seems to peak at that transition, that important transition into middle school, where there's everyone involved, parents, service providers, teachers, have a much more focused view and attention on the needs of those students. And so it becomes a key time for decisions being made, especially for students with this profile.
Can I make a philosophical comment that actually somewhat, one of the things I like about the investment that we're making in bringing kids back to Dover-Sherborn, besides being the right thing for the students, is I actually think it has at least my conversations with the leaders of the school, it seems to have an impact on the environment and the community as a whole. I mean, the reality is we don't have a lot of diversity in our districts. And if we have students who are learning empathy and learning skills that you would come with having different learners or differently able people in the population, I think that benefits all the students. So I like the fact that we are, for educational reasons, for social reasons, but also for impact on the general community, making investments in bringing students back.
I think our leaders directly support that.
Absolutely. Dana, I couldn't agree with you more. And for me, I know that there's many of us, and there's a lot of appropriate decisions. There are a lot of decisions where, it's very appropriate to mine the data and make decisions based on what the data says. But we all work and are involved in an enterprise where a lot of what we do and a lot of decisions we make are made based on anecdotal data as well. And I know that sometimes that's that's heresy to say that, but it is the truth and it is the fact. And the issues around social, emotional health, mental health, there is just no doubt that anecdotally across the country, and the towns of Sherborn and Dover are not immune to this, students every year, more and more, with increasing numbers, present at school with a variety of social, emotional, and mental health issues. And it is growing. It's not abating. And so, those are challenges that we will be facing, and the presentations that have been made tonight are our efforts at this point in time to address the best we can, the issues that we believe are impacting, in these cases, a number of students. So, we'll always endeavor to provide the data that we can, and I think it's important, but there are going to be times, and there are some times where anecdotally, I think that information is just as important.
And I agree with Dana. I think we'll see, and Bill and I had a conversation there where, we'll see these programs have effect on the other students, and the other students will be, in different ways, a part of those programs and add to the richness of the experience of all students, which is what we could hope for. Kathy?
So, just because someone has to ask the question, not because I have any philosophical difference with what you just said, but when you put it all together, if more students stay in district for all the right reasons, and we can develop programs that make parents feel that that's the right place and the kids are, thrive, might it cost more than if some students went out of district and we got some circuit breaker reimbursement? Just to put that on the table, do we have any sense of that? I understand there's been some few examples people can talk about, I get that. But in the big picture, if this is where education is going and this is where our school system is going, will we need to be able to say to people, this is where we're going and it might cost more?
I think that's a good question, and I think frankly, time will tell. But what we don't really know, if we look at the language-based numbers, 4 years ago, the program started with 2 students. This year, we're servicing 10 students. If that program was not started, it's very possible that all 10 of those students might be somewhere else, costing Dover and Sherborn X amount of money. Some of it will come back in circuit breaker, but remember, these programs are, the cost of these programs out of district don't yield large dollars in circuit breaker reimbursement.
Some of them, right, don't.
Yes.
Right.
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 But these kind of programs in particular, language-based programs,
Don't.
do not.
Right.
Because their out-of-district costs are, might be on average $10,000 above the bench, well, no,
Or the bench cost. No, I
above the
understand.
per pupil, 4
Yeah.
times per pupil threshold.
Don't we absorb transport? That's not circuit breaker.
No, and that's right, that's a very good point. So the transportation costs are not. There are occasions when we do keep students in district that in fact might be a very low incident student, but there's a desire on the parents' part, and the school agrees to keep that student in district. And while in the end, it may cost it may cost a few more dollars because of potential circuit breaker reimbursement, this is one of those times where, how do you measure in financial terms the outcomes beyond just the academic experience that student has staying with his or her peers in the community, as opposed to traveling X number of miles, X number of minutes, X number of hours every day to and from their educational placement, and that hampers them from making true local connections on a regular basis. And sometimes we struggle with that, but I will make that recommendation every time for a student. It may cost us a few more dollars, but if we believe that the other outcomes for that student, that are difficult to measure or account for financially, I just think that's the right thing to do, and that's our obligation.
But I've done my own personal efforts to try to understand trends in special ed education costs as it impacts each town. And beyond the reasons that Bill just talked about, I think we've had greatest success in Sherborn in retaining students in district, both at the elementary school level and then continuing into the high school. And we would not have made our budgets for the last 3 years had those programs not yielded the financial impact. And, my best estimates, it's well over $1 million that the town is spending less on special education this current year than in 2014. And again, that has gotten us through our budget cycles. And it is, I think, attributed to the work that when Terry was special ed director at Pine Hill of changing the engagement model. And you can see that the student population that we have that's aged grade 6 to age 22 is significantly lower than Dover now. I think that it's attributable to that focus that started 6, 7, 8 years ago at Pine Hill. So, I mean, this is the solution. I think in the short term, this is more likely to have a beneficial impact to Dover now because of the quirks in how we budget. But again, Sherborn's already engaged in a substantial amount of benefit, and that's been shouldered to some extent by the taxpayers of Dover, as we've avoided out-of-district placements and we've retained them in the region.
Okay, thank you. So the additional FTEs and things we'll see when we see a revised budget in February?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay.
I have some comments.
Okay, great.
Before we review.
So the next
questions.
item is to review the questions and talk about the FY18 budget.
Right.
Thank you, Christine, that was great.
Thank you all. Before we get into the questions, other than the special education program additions, which total about $132,000 that you heard Chris talk about, we do not have any other adjustments for consideration this evening. Our plan will be to present a comprehensive package of budget adjustments at the February 7th meeting. And the reason for that, there are three key decisions and data points that will occur between now and February 7th that I think will prove helpful in crafting the adjustments that we believe will be necessary in order to close what really is a budget gap between the current proposed budget and both Warrant and advisory's guidance. And so I see us going through a similar process that we went through last year, albeit perhaps not 4 versions at the region, but maybe 2 or maybe 3, because we have 2 more meetings to go before we have to. So, but I think right now, although I know, and we would internally, we want to just get at this, I think a little more patience will help us as we go forward. So on January 26th, the Governor Baker will present the FY18 state budget. Next one, we'll get our first look at, for the region, both Chapter 70 and Chapter 71, Chapter 71 being the transportation dollars. And I do expect that we will see some increase in Chapter 70. So we want to take advantage of that and be able to plug that into our numbers, as well as the transportation money. Secondly, on February 6th, the West Suburban Health Group Steering Committee, that's the group that's charged with making the rate recommendations to the board. They're meeting on February 6th. We will attend that meeting. We'll get a preview of what the steering committee is thinking in terms of health insurance rates for FY18. And then that recommendation will go to the board on February 9th. So I anticipate on February 7th, we'll be able to share some information and then make some calculations on Monday for part of Tuesday night's presentation. And then also, especially this year, with retirements, contractually, February 1st is a key date. At the region, there have been 4 employees who provided notification by October 1st of their intent to retire at the end of this year. They actually have until February 1st to change their mind. So as we talked last time, the current proposed budget does not reflect potential retirement savings. So once we get to that February 1st date, that will be part of our package that will be presented on the 7th. So I think that should serve us well. And then one more thing, well, actually 2 more things. But first, in one of my responses, and we're going to get to the questions, there was a question about class size, and in one of my responses I indicated there would be a report available tonight. Well, sorry, it's not available tonight. It's it's being put into a format that is different than what you saw in November. And I just want to make sure that two things happen. Number one, that it's in a format that reflects all of those numbers, but in a way that is very transparent and much more easily understood. And that's almost done, but before I share it with you, I need to share it with John and Scott and some of the staff, so that they can have an opportunity to review that data. So I do anticipate being able to get that out to you ahead of the February 7th meeting, so you'll have an opportunity to review it. And then the last thing, I want to point out two things. In my memo on the proposed budget, on the second page, where I talked about the proposed special education initiatives for FY18, in my little description, I indicated that Chris would present a pre-K to 12 proposal related to occupational therapy services. Oops, it's not occupational therapy, as you saw, it's BCBA. So if you would make that note. And it also, that same response is in, on the last page of yes, the Warrant questions. So just if you would note when you get to that, it's not occupational therapy, it's the BCBA.
I thought Chris was giving us one more presentation.
Okay, so those are my comments regarding the budget, and we're happy to entertain questions about the questions.
Are the questions answers, right?
Can I ask
Yes.
a question before we get to the questions?
Yeah.
And that's this, so I understand from years past, obviously, when the governor releases his budget, it's never the last word, and all goes on.
Right.
Can go on. I don't know whether that's also true of the health insurance rate. When they set it, that's it?
That's it.
We can take that to the...
We can.
Okay. Regardless of what happens at the national level after that. Okay.
So one more thing, so you received 3 pieces of information prior to the meeting. They were paper clipped. The 3 documents were in the order in which you heard some information tonight. The first document was a pro forma budget for the proposed transition program. We're happy to go into more detail with you tonight if you have questions about that. I wouldn't mind just spending a quick second reviewing that. It's that one that says draft.
Which I think is the first page on the handout.
The second document was a copy of the slides that Chris presented for you. And then the third document was answers to some questions that were posed by regional school committee members.
So this is in addition to
What was in the
It is
packet.
indeed. It is.
should read this, not skip it thinking I've already read it.
No, please,
Exactly.
Michael, please read
Because
it.
at least one of them is my insightfully brilliant question.
And you can get to guess which one that is. Did you want to talk, Bill, about the transition program numbers
Yeah,
at all?
so
as
let's
the
go
next
through the
item?
pro forma. No, I have a copy of it. Yeah, oh, it is inside. Okay. And then, John, you can help me out if I misspeak. But, so what the pro forma budget shows, bottom line, is that we anticipate when we apply for the Metro West grant, that we will, and our understanding is that we have some leeway in how we write the application for requesting the funds. One thing we understand is that Metro West wants to see in the application and in the development of, and they ask us to put a budget together, they would like to see that the district is making an effort, is contributing to moving moving toward fully funding the program. So what this indicates is that we are, and as we understand it, the grant will pay for the clinician position. In year one, they'll also pay for anticipated startup costs and for professional development that is done in conjunction with the BRYT program. So those startup and the first year consulting cost, we believe will be about $10,000. $6,000 of that is for furniture, other supplies and materials. $4,000 will be for the consulting, and that would be a one-off charge. The $70,400 salary for the clinician is based on the Master's 15, Step 8. And so I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail because we've listed the assumptions for you at the bottom. But what this basically shows is that as things stand right now, the financial commitment in year one from the district is the cost. It's not the all-in cost. We can adjust that. Is the salary for the paraprofessional, the educational assistant, who would act as the program coordinator. Year two funding, what we believe we propose. So in year one, we'd be asking for $70,040. Year two, we'd be asking for $50,000. So the incremental cost, we carry the $35,500 from year one funding into year two. What we've also done is, it's not quite all in cost, but we've projected what annual increases in salaries would be those 4 years and included that as we move forward. So the bottom line is that the incremental cost in each of the 4 years to get to fully funding is shown at that bottom line. So it goes from year one, $35,500, to year two, $23,550, to year three, $28,638, and year four, the $28,669. If we compare that to what our operating budget is this year, the incremental cost each year to fully fund this program is approximately 0.15% of the operating budget.
Year
Or based on this year, it would go up a little bit.
Plus the impact of benefits.
Plus the impact of benefits, which we have not shown. And, perhaps we'll hire people that don't need the benefits.
Right.
Tongue in cheek. So that's just a review of the pro forma budget. And now I won't say anything else unless you ask me a question.
Okay, go quickly. No questions.
Well, I think it is important to note that as we're building this program and getting funding over 3 years, we're also hopefully collecting data and benchmark and all the things we're talking about, so that when we get to year 4, if for some bizarre reason that is not going to happen, we don't need the program. It's not like we've built a building. This is a
right.
And if we're proving it's a useful program, then this will be the right thing to be in the budget.
Or I was thinking if we somehow solve the anxiety issue and there's less kids, not that,
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But technically, as you know, as a school committee in 2017, your decisions today, you can't hold the school committee in 2018, to that decision. So technically, every year through this process, that will be reevaluated.
Except, of course, for those 20-year contracts we can sign.
Yes. That's
that was for
that's
savings.
one exception.
Mary?
And I have a question about the 35.5.
Yes.
Is that currently in the budget or not?
Yes.
Yes.
So
That's
that's
with-
not another additional
No,
cost?
that's within the proposed budget. And we are continuing to look at, we are going to be going through a process of looking at all of our educational assistant needs. We're still looking at the transition pieces and how those will work out. And, if there's any way that we feel we can reasonably reallocate current EA expenditures to cover this, then, that, we'll put that on the table clearly.
Kathy?
So it was mentioned earlier with the BRYT program, or we're thinking about, it was the staff member that mentioned that there was a lot of money spent on tutoring.
Yes.
Exorbitant amount, I forget the number. But when we were, and so when we look at these numbers, I think it's useful to think about how maybe some tutoring money could be potentially not spent, dollars were spent for this program. But when we looked at the budget in Dover, we actually trying to figure out what the line item was that went to tutoring, and so we've got to write this question down. But is the tutoring number under the high school sped tutoring, is all the tutoring under one place, or is it somewhere else?
Don, did you want to answer?
Both schools, and it's just my guidance department.
So we wouldn't be able to look at the budget and figure out the current.
Yeah, I think we can, and it's not huge, it's like 8,001, 8,000.
86 and 77,
Okay, all right, so we'll go back and do that.
under 27, yeah.
So there are students who are not in special education, and that would go through tutoring in the guidance line.
And the ones that are in special ed, they would go in, so it's a split number.
Yes, but.
Okay, thank you. We'll go back to those.
And so, we still have work to do, and again, part of our version 2 package, we've already talked, we included in the proposed budget is the EA salary plus some money for equipment. And so now that we know we can include the startup piece in the grant request, there's another, I don't know if it's 6,000 that we will address as well. So we'll be able to apply that.
I have a sort of general question about the grant, because it's unclear, the funding of how much money the system gets from the grant. Is there a nominal amount or a ceiling amount, or some stated amount of money that the organization that gives money provides, or is it each individual system comes up with what it thinks it's going to need to run this? How does that work?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
So we did reach out to not only Metro West, but a number of programs that are in existence, and those numbers vary. So some districts had as high as 225,000, and other districts had 150. I think we were looking at
over 4 years.
Over 4 years total.
Okay.
So I think the higher you go, the you have to know is over time, then you're going to increase those costs. So we also want to look at keeping our costs as low and reasonable as possible. So, to ask for extra money really isn't financially reasonable. So there is flexibility within that, how much school districts ask for.
However,
So
we understand.
we decided how much we were going to ask for.
Well, to an extent.
Right.
But if we could submit a grant that says in year 1, we believe the clinician cost will be $100,000. And the startup costs need to be reasonable. They need to reflect what we believe those will be. Plus the consulting, which we know that first year is $4,000. We understand that if approved for the grant, and in hiring the clinician under that example of $100,000, we're actually able to hire someone for $70,000. We can't keep the additional $30,000.
Oh, no, I wouldn't think so.
So what Metro West is looking for is, again, to use John's words, a reasonable estimate when the grant is being put together of where that clinician salary will be. And then the succeeding year grants, as we understand it, years 2 and 3, go to offset, again, the clinician's salary.
I just want to understand whether they say we have grants for, we'll pay $75,000 toward a clinician.
Right.
Or whether we're saying, this is what we need.
Right. They're
Just
asking
wanted
for.
to understand
No,
the
it's an excellent
process.
question, because a lot of grants do have that ceiling. And they'll
Right.
say, here's what we're gonna give you.
Right,
We have some flexibility around the design of the grant.
yeah,
So
okay. I
it
just
can
wanted
be-
to understand the process.
One thing we haven't asked, which I think is, I don't know how they look at that, but, and we'll ask this question, in year one certainly, would they consider, the full in cost, I guess? So.
When it was first talked
cost of
about, that was the
benefits.
impression that I had, that there was going to be no input from the system for years 1, 2, and 3, and then we would be expected to absorb it in year 4.
So again, our understanding is that a district can apply for the grant in a number of different ways. So we need to confirm this, but theoretically, we could apply for 100, 100, and 100 each year, full cost, but we have to show that in year 4, we're in one, in one transaction, we're picking up that 100,000. Our concern is that, first of all, these are competitive grants, so we're not guaranteed receiving it. We believe, based on the extensive work that our high school leadership team has done with the Brookline Community Mental Health Center and the BRYT program, that our odds are high that we'll receive the grant. But we also want the grant to be written in a way that reflects that the district is willing to make a commitment to funding this grant as well. We don't want to be in a position, I think, of saying, oh yeah, here's a grant, you fund it fully for 3 years, and then, yeah, we'll pick it up. With that grant being then judged against a dozen other grants that clearly show that the district is making a commitment in funding this program over the 3 years, so that at the end of the 3 years, there's a high probability that the program will continue to be funded.
Mary, can we bring it back to Michael?
So we believe that the application will be available sometime around the end of January, beginning of February. Decisions, though, are not till spring, so would not be until after our budgets are set.
All right, if there's additional questions, we can ask offline now, if that's okay.
Well,
Yes.
Is there a commitment as part of the grant that it must continue, supposing it were not to be, I doubt that will be the case, but supposing it were not successful?
No, not to our knowledge, and I don't believe they could hold the district to that,
Okay.
based on what was said earlier.
The one thing that, having done the research and spoken to some districts, the academic coordinator, whether that's a teacher or in our case, educational assistant, that is not included with any grant funding. So we really couldn't even ask for that. So under the
Okay.
prerequisites of the grant
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
their money that the Metro West has received is based on a health clinician, mental health clinician.
Okay.
That's good.
Do we have a name for our program? If it were to-
We don't. That will certainly be, if it comes to fruition, be one of the things. Some districts have called it BRYT, others have actually called it the Bridge Program. There's a number of different entities. Yeah, no, it's a good question.
Life is marketing.
Yeah.
All right, great. So do we want to look at any of the
Sure.
questions?
Yeah,
So does
sure.
anyone have any further thoughts on the question and answers, either included in the packet or shared this evening, that they would like to? I think the administration did a great job answering.
Yeah, I thought the questions were
succinctly
great and the
everything.
answers were great. Very comprehensive.
We're always willing to answer more questions, so if they come up between now and moving forward.
You know I have one.
Mary,
And I'm sure this won't be the last.
It won't.
I know, that's not
Mary?
a problem.
On the circuit breaker,
Yeah.
you said that you would be talking about it, in terms of budgeting net of N%. Have you made any further thoughts on that?
So in Sherborn, we have budgeted at 60% net of
I'm
circuit breaker.
talking about here.
Yeah, no,
Not
Oh, with the
Sherborn.
region,
Yeah,
oh.
the region.
Yeah. No, we haven't had the opportunity to look at that in detail yet,
Okay.
but we will, and that will be part of our February 7th.
All right.
Yes. And we do expect that, what is it, about 26,000 this year? So this year is the first year, certainly in recent memory, that the region has applied for circuit breaker reimbursement based on in-district cost. And we had estimated around $26,000. You'll remember that $26,000 was part of the adjustments that were made, and that money's paying for an education.
Part of the teaching, the education. Oh, no, you're right.
The educational is paying for part of the educational assistant that's assigned to a particular student. And we believe that the FY18 in-district circuit breaker number will go up. Beyond that, we're not sure how much, but my thinking at this point is that we would do the same thing. So we would look at that circuit breaker reimbursement as a way of.
Revenue, sort of.
Yes, but as a way to close the gap.
Right.
It's the dollars we're spending this year
Yes,
that will help offset for next year.
correct. So
That's all we have to get our handle on right now, is to figure out how to fully load those costs
right, but
as assertively as possible to
absolutely.
supplement the
Yep, we are.
filing.
Yeah.
Can I
Kathy?
say that again? I think I got it, but can I just say, so you provided for us this beautiful chart about
I did.
in-district
This
sped
one.
costs as part of the question and answer?
Yeah, that's actually.
Oh,
Back page,
yes,
yeah.
yes, yep.
Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. That's very helpful. So when I look at this, basically, I think what it says is that for this current year, we have 167 students in districts receiving sped services, and that's about
164.
164.
164, and that is.
I know where you're going. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
But go there.
That's right?
Yes.
2.1 million out of our current, out of our budget at the region is on
164.
in-district sped.
Yes.
That's a hugely helpful number to have charted out, so thank you. That's gonna probably go up next year if we develop
Yes,
some of these additional programs that we
Yes.
just heard about. right?
yes,
The 132.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And is this chart, fairly comprehensive? You were able to pull out the real numbers for all these six line items?
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
Yep.
great.
I hope so.
So where am I going?
I thought you were going to relate this to how much circuit breaker.
Well, right, I wasn't asked that, but I compliment you. So we can predict though,
Thank you for the compliment.
you can predict how much of this 2.1 is gonna come back in circuit breaker?
Not based on these numbers. So the reality is that of the 164 students,
Yeah,
there might be 3 when we add up the costs associated with those students that will meet the circuit breaker threshold and allow us to use that data
Right.
to apply and for the circuit breaker reimbursement.
Isn't 4X our minimum
Yeah.
local contribution.
Right, so the threshold for determining FY18, we believe will be just a little less than $44,000. So for an in-district student, one student, in order to get any money back, the amount of money spent on that student for special education services, and not everything is eligible, not all of the expenses are eligible, at a minimum has to meet that threshold, and then anything beyond that comes back at, of the eligible, comes back at, we
And it's not
would
real
estimate
dollars.
70.
It's the state calculation on services,
Right,
right? So
yeah.
it's not even like,
Yeah.
oh, we spent X amount of dollars
Right.
paying for our teacher for these kids, that doesn't,
Right.
that's not.
Then they have their own
Yeah.
formula to recalculate
So if we
what the
if we
cost
spend
would be.
$100,000 on a teacher,
Right.
the state formula may allow $60,000.
And then,
if
And then
they're-
you get the X
If they're full
percentage of.
inclusion, we're not even allowed to apply any of the,
You are allowed, you're just never gonna hit threshold.
Right.
With that.
no, but if they're full inclusion plus getting all those different services, is that the part of them being part of the general ed population also chargeable?
Yes.
Okay.
You get a, yes, you do, you get
Okay.
a
Because-
small amount of money for that, but it's really about the IEP grid page and the services that are on that grid entered into the state calculations. And then you get your number, and it's based on, is it provided individually, is it small group, is it large group? And that will then trigger an audit, because we haven't done it in the past, which is fine, but it's based on how the district writes the IEPs, what information gets put on that IEP, and you have to be very, very specific. So it's a process of.
They're definitely not doing it in a way that encourages you to keep students in district. Since it's much easier to figure out the other district.
so then, Bill, just to finish, so although you know there are a couple of students who might qualify for this reimbursement currently here this year, you're not budgeting on getting any of that money and planning next year's budget?
We have not yet.
And is it your intention to stay
Yes.
with that plan?
No.
No,
Okay,
that's
so
what
that's
I
the part
said.
I missed, so you're
We'll
planning
be
to.
making, that will be part of our
February.
February 7th,
Okay, thank
version
you.
2 adjustments.
Thank you.
So minimally, we believe it'll be, the 26,000 from this year,
That's how you got it.
and we'll do an estimate, for any additional funds, and then we'll apply that in terms of our version 2.
So,
I would say though, I think we have, the piece that was funded this year, we did budget to be funded next year. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
So not new, but existing. We're carrying over what we know.
What you know to be true.
Yes.
so any additional budget questions from the region? Okay. So if additional questions come up between now and our next meeting, just forward them to me and we'll have answers in February. The next item on our agenda, number 4, is to vote on the proposed change to the program of studies that was presented last month and in last month's packet. I haven't heard of any additional questions. So I would like to invite a motion to approve the proposed changes to the 2017-18 program of studies for the regional high school.
So moved.
Second? And that's Lori. Additional discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Item 5 on our agenda is the monthly financial report. Ms. Fattore?
So in your packet, you have the revenue report and the status of appropriations for December 31st. Everything was fairly quiet, luckily, so there's not much to report. We trickling still in middle school and high school activity fees, so you see that little red getting smaller, and we are exceeding the parking
I would hope so.
Exactly, so that number will continue to build also. I think the last month I noted that we had the high school 10-month admin assist in the office unfilled. It has now been encumbered, so you'll see that 33,000 that used to be on that school building line go down to 9,500. So that adjustment has been made. And at this point still, payroll's in the process of encumbering the winter sports, so you'll see sort of large amounts still sitting out there in the athletics. That also includes the spring. That should do, when it gets closer to that season, all said and done, we're still looking at a projected positive salary variance of salaries of about 20,000. That's assuming we continue to spend substitutes in the custodian. On the expenditures, we plan to this month re-review some of the encumbrances we've done in utilities and take a closer look at our custodial accounts. We did pass out to the building leadership status reports of their budget, so they're all working with their department heads and their departments to see where we stand on their budgets today. So we may have some more information for you come in your January 31st report that would be reported on in February. We'll also have your revolving funds as of December 31st at the February meeting.
Questions?
In transport services includes expenditures for athletic transportation.
Right.
Yes, and so not all
So
of that's
that-
been encumbered. They're encumbering by season.
That's as you go see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it fair to guess at this point, there's nothing to make us think on the expense side? We're gonna, once you add up the positives and negatives, we'll end up negative.
No, I don't think.
Not at this point, no, but
So we're, just with the 150 in state aid increase, we're well on track to have offset a fair amount of the G50.
Okay.
And validated, we did a pretty good job of changing our.
Budgeting.
Changing to the, going for a zero variance.
yeah, I think we see that clearly now with the salaries. We need a few more months with the expenses to really get a better sense, but I think that's right.
Snowstorm or two. Could change that. All right, no questions from, okay. Town report, Dana had the illustrious job of what
Who
seems.
knew how
as I
much fun
said-
it was to update our entry in the Dover Town report?
Well, I said, it always seems like such a simple process
Yes, it
and
goes to both towns.
takes much longer than.
It does go to both towns.
No. So I'll be pretty quick. Everyone has got, I have a couple copies in case anybody,
Oh,
you?
yeah,
I do.
it's just draft.
It's just a draft, but if anybody wants a copy of it, feel free to share. I just,
So that's not public till it's out in the town report.
right.
Community
I should put
members?
draft on it. I think it says draft. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Yeah,
I didn't-
yeah, but, well, that's why we don't usually share. We don't usually share.
Okay, well.
Teasing me.
No, definitely not. I would just highlight, I did add from last year, we were obviously able to report a successful outcome of our superintendent search. So thanks to Richard, we opted to put that front and center in the report, which was a really smart thing to
We
do.
just buried it in the regular.
And also highlighting that Dr. Keogh is a 1980 graduate of Dover-Sherborn High School, which I think is a very fun fact. Thank you to Dawn for making sure that I got all the finance numbers right in there. Always good to have your numbers correct when they go public. One question I had, do we actually have a Friends of Music, or has it been subsumed into Friends of the Performing Arts?
Friends of the Performing Arts. No, it's just FOPA.
It's just FOPA, okay, I'll take, I didn't want to cut that out and then have someone say, what about Friends
Yeah,
of Music? Right.
Friends of Music is.
That's what I thought. Okay. And then the only other thing I added is, I thought it was somewhat sad that the only outcome that we talked about was testing, and not about any of the other great things that we do. So I added a few paragraph on goals and just imported the district goals in there.
Yeah, that was nice.
Since we had talked about them, I thought it was important to highlight something other than just test scores. as things that we do very well. Otherwise, it was a update to last time. So if you have any other questions?
Well, I just didn't know if you wanted to rewrite this in verse.
No, thank you. But I did actually simplify a lot of sentences because I definitely write more like an engineer than whoever had written it before. So I simplified a lot of clausy sentences. But if you see any typos or anything, definitely let me know.
Okay. So we'll have a motion and a second to approve the town report.
So moved.
Second? Sure. Lori, thank you. And those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank
Anyone
you.
opposed can rewrite it themselves. All right.
The consent agenda has the approval of the minutes from December 6th. Athletic donations, which are, just bear with me. Oh,
50 pairs of hockey socks,
Oh.
24 hockey bags, and 25 practice strips.
thank you, Dana.
Partridge in the pear tree.
And Luder's Environmental, it's $125, I think?
Yes.
Donation. Anyone, any holds on the consent agenda?
No.
Okay. I'll take a motion to approve. Second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I would like to say a huge thank you to Hopkinton's Boosters who donated all those
That's
things
awesome.
to the co-op
Really
team.
awesome.
Does Jeff send a thank you note on everything?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I know the girls, I
awesome.
went to a game last week and the girls were really excited about the
Yeah, no, it
socks and the
is.
bags.
It is
and
awesome. It's just another example of the great partnership between the two schools.
Yeah.
So it's great.
It was great. Communications for members' information. 2016 school and district accountability reports, headmaster's report at the middle school and the high school, and the assistant superintendent report. Anyone have any questions?
Yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah, no. I mean, even though we don't have questions, it doesn't mean we haven't read it and appreciated it.
Exactly.
And final is items for January 31st joint meeting and February 7th RSC meeting. The joint meeting, I believe we have a handful of agenda items already, but if anyone comes up with,
Can you share what those are?
I don't have my list from my notes, but Bill might.
We'll have some information from some aspects of the coordinated program review to share, in particular the food service review. We will do a curriculum update. We'll also do an update on a mid-year update on our goals. And that's what I have
And
so
we might have an
far.
executive session on
And hopefully we might
collective
have some
bargaining.
policy things.
And policy. Yes.
Do you get any substantive information about West Suburban between now and January 31st?
No, well,
Do they publish even an annual report on the state of their reserves? or-
no, I will find out about that. But there is something I think we can report on. We do know they'll be offering a new health plan, a new product beginning July 1st. They are going to be offering a high deductible with a health savings account plan that is open to all districts. But for us, that would have to be negotiated.
So as part of our executive session, piece of our agenda, can we just revisit some healthcare issues, particularly since last year we all kind of parted ways for a brief period of time? It might be helpful just to understand how healthcare can figure into the contract and long-term cost trajectory.
Yes, so,
We'll put collective bargaining on the agenda.
yeah.
I'm not saying any more now. Richard?
Three things. One, I hope for the joint meeting, I had asked a couple months ago about trying to get some input about what our building people thought about the appropriate size of the Metro program, and that idea seemed to be the most potentially most productively discussed at a joint meeting because there were
the
issues
intake
about-
is.
Yeah. So I hope we can have that. Probably it would be too late for this year, but I don't think we should put it off. I think it would be a valuable discussion at least to have, to see whether people think we're the right size. That's one. The other, no real rush to discuss this, but I really do think that this committee ought to discuss a policy about negotiating and signing long-year contracts. Just for those of you who weren't there, I was really quite taken aback with the idea that we actually had the authority to sign a 20-year contract at what was really the very last moment. This is for the buying energy. And I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, but in any event, I think we need to think about at least some kind of a hearing and multi-meeting discussion if we are going to enter into that kind of thing.
So could that go to the policy subcommittee, Richard?
It could, except that it's a regional specific issue because local school committees can't do that. So it may be that it's moved for them. On the other hand, the policy subcommittee might want to investigate
to do the
whether or not
research,
the regional districts.
So that should be a topic at an upcoming regional meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't need to be February. I think it would be valuable to grapple with it though before the end of the year. That was true. And then the third, as I mentioned, I think last I was here, which was a couple months ago, we region need to begin to look ahead at the Spanish issue about how the elementary Spanish is going to impact our Spanish program. It apparently won't be for next year, that's fine, but we really need to think about that because that's going to have...
Is there a grade 3 right now?
They're on 3.
Three,
Right.
yeah.
So it'll be grade 4 next year, and
Right.
so we really ought to be able to...
Yeah, it's only 2 years out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So full students who would have had these 6 full years would be coming to the district in FY20.
And,
Right.
yeah, and obviously the question for us is what are they going to take? Are they going to be able to blend right into classes we already offered? How are we going to cope with what will now be a very wide range of Spanish abilities coming into our middle school, and whether that evens out before we get to high school.
Excellent.
I've
Always
had
forward
that in the
thinking.
back of my mind for 3 years.
Now's the time.
Now I can bring it out.
I'm impressed you can remember something for 3 years.
All right.
I can't remember for 3 weeks.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, by the way, Scott, great production. Awesome production, really fun. Really fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.